Ladies and gentlemen, my friend, I don't know what battle you're facing today. I don't know what words you're holding back, what storm is stirring in your heart, or what injustice you've endured, but I came here to remind you of something powerful. When God tells you to stay quiet, it's not because you're powerless. It's not because your opinion doesn't matter or your voice has no value. On the contrary, the instruction to be silent is often given to those who have every right to speak, every reason to respond, and every ability to fight back. But God isn't interested in us proving our strength to the world. He's interested in developing our strength in Him. Silence in its divine form is one of the greatest displays of inner power a person can show. It's easy to lash out. It's easy to speak in anger, to let emotion drive your words, to demand justice with your own voice. But it takes an extraordinary kind of courage to hold your tongue when your flesh is crying out to be heard. It takes spiritual maturity to say nothing when saying something would feel so satisfying in the moment. Yet that's exactly what God asks of us in certain seasons, to hold our peace, not because we're weak, but because we trust Him to be our voice, our defender, and our advocate. Think of Jesus standing before Pilate, accused by the religious leaders, lied about by false witnesses. Son of God, the one who spoke the universe into existence, remained silent. He didn't argue, he didn't shout, he didn't prove them wrong. He stood in strength, knowing that silence was the will of His Father. Could He have silenced the lies with a single word? Absolutely. But He chose restraint, and in doing so, He showed us the way of surrendered strength. When you stay quiet in obedience to God, you're not ignoring injustice or avoiding conflict. You're submitting your flesh to the Spirit. You're choosing trust over impulse. You're choosing to let God write the outcome instead of trying to control it yourself. That kind of restraint is a rare and beautiful form of power. So often we confuse reaction with strength. We think we have to speak up to prove our worth, prove our rightness, prove our strength. When God tells you to stay quiet, He's asking you to place your confidence in Him, not in your words. He's saying, let me handle this. Let me speak on your behalf. Let me show you what I can do when you step aside, and give me room. And it's not easy. When you're misunderstood, the natural instinct is to explain. When you're falsely accused, you want to defend. When you're hurt, your first impulse is to retaliate. But the Spirit-filled life is not one of impulse, it's one of discipline. And discipline sometimes looks like biting your tongue, walking away, and praying through the urge to react. There's strength in silence, because silence requires surrender. It means trusting that God sees what others. It means believing that He's working when it feels like nothing is happening. It means resting in the truth that vindication doesn't come from people, it comes from heaven. Many of us have wasted time, energy, and spiritual peace trying to fight battles God never told us to fight. We argue when we should listen. We defend ourselves when God wanted to step in. We post when we should pray. And afterward, we're left exhausted, wondering why it all still feels unresolved. The answer is simple: because we tried to fight spiritual battles with earthly weapons. And sometimes God's weapon of choice is silence. If God is telling you to stay quiet in this season, it's not punishment, it's preparation. He's teaching you the kind of strength that doesn't need to be loud to be real. He's developing your ability to trust His justice instead of demanding your own. And that kind of strength is what sets you apart in a world that's constantly shouting. Your silence becomes a signal not of fear, but of faith. Imagine a lion, majestic and confident, sitting in calm stillness. The lion doesn't roar at every noise in the jungle. Why? Because it knows what it is. It knows its power. It doesn't need to prove anything. Likewise, when you know who you are in God, you don't need to respond to every critic, every insult, or every accusation. You're secure, you're anchored, you're strong, even in silence. And here's the miracle: when you stay silent in obedience to God, He often does what your words could never do. He changes hearts. He shifts circumstances. He exposes truth in ways you couldn't orchestrate. He fights for you. And when He fights, He doesn't lose. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing and stand still. Not in fear, not in passivity, but in bold, faith-filled trust that your Father is in control. That kind of silence is sacred. It's the silence of warriors who have learned that God's voice thunders louder than ours ever could. It's the silence of disciples who've been through storms and discovered that sometimes Jesus calms the waves and sometimes he calms us while the waves keep crashing. So let the world misunderstand you. Let them misjudge your motives. Let them talk while you trust. You don't need to fight to be heard when God has called you to be still. The one who sees in secret will reward you openly. The one who knows your heart will bring the truth to light. And when he does, it will be undeniable that your silence wasn't weakness. It was worship. You are strong, not because you always speak, but because you know when not to. You are strong, not because you win arguments but because you win the war with. And you are strong, not because the world applauds you, but because your Father in heaven smiles on your obedience. So if God is telling you to stay quiet, stand tall, stay faithful, and know that the silence you keep in obedience today will echo with victory tomorrow. Sometimes in life, the most challenging thing God will ask of you is not to move, not to speak, not to act, but to be still, to quiet your soul, to wait, to trust. In a world that thrives on movement, noise, and immediate action, God's call to stillness can feel counterintuitive. But it is in that stillness where something sacred happens. It is in the silence, in the quiet corners of our hearts, that we hear him clearest. When everything around you is loud, people's opinions, expectations, criticism, even your own thoughts, it becomes almost impossible to discern God's voice. You can be so caught up in what others are saying that you miss what God is whispering. He doesn't compete with the chaos. He waits until you're ready to listen. And that's why he often tells us to stay quiet, not because there's nothing to say, but because he's waiting for you to clear the noise so he can speak into your situation. You might be wondering why God feels distant right now. You pray, but it feels like no answer comes. You seek direction, but the path ahead remains unclear. You ask for wisdom, but confusion still lingers. Could it be that he's waiting for you to slow down, to get alone with him, to be still long enough to hear that still small voice? The kind of voice that doesn't shout over the crowd, but speaks softly into the hearts of those who are willing to lean in and listen. We often think of stillness as doing nothing, but spiritual stillness is far from passive. It is an intentional It is the active pursuit of God through rest, through quiet, through trust. It is shutting down the distractions of life so that your soul can come alive to the presence of God. When God tells you to stay quiet, he is inviting you into that secret place. The place where he doesn't just answer your questions, he transforms your heart. There's a moment in Scripture that shows us this truth with great beauty. The prophet Elijah, exhausted, afraid, and running for his life, hides in a cave. He's desperate for God to show up. He's looking for a powerful sign. And then the word says, there was a great wind, but God wasn't in the wind. Then an earthquake, but God wasn't in the earthquake. Then a fire, but God wasn't in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. That's where God was, in the whisper. In the stillness. Why a whisper? Because God is close, because he doesn't want to just be heard with your ears. He wants to be felt in your spirit, and that requires silence, that requires space, that requires your attention. He speaks to those who are listening, not just hearing, but truly listening with a posture of surrender, with a spirit of humility, with a heart that is hungry for his will, more than its own. When you're always speaking, always reacting, always moving, you leave no room for divine interruption. But when you're still, when you're quiet, when you hold back your voice and open your heart, that's when God does his best work. That's when he whispers direction, pours out wisdom, reminds you of your identity, and fills you with peace that doesn't make sense to the natural mind. You can't manufacture the voice of God, you can't rush it, you can't force it, but you can prepare yourself for it, and that preparation often comes through silence, through waiting, through choosing not to react in the moment, but to retreat to his presence instead. It's not about ignoring your problems, it's about inviting God into them, and often that invitation comes through a quiet spirit and a surrendered will. The stillness God calls you to may feel uncomfortable at first. You may feel like nothing is happening, but stillness is not stagnation. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean God isn't moving. Stillness is where he roots you. It's where he builds your faith. It's where he reminds you that your identity is not in what you do or say, but in who you are to him. You are his. You are seen. You are heard even in silence. Think of how many times Jesus withdrew from the crowds. He went to solitary places, not because he didn't care about the people, but because he needed to stay aligned with the Father. His power came from prayer. His authority came from time spent in silence, in communion with God. If Jesus, the Son of God, needed quiet time with the Father, how much more do we? Sometimes God will allow the noise around you to increase, just so you will long for his stillness more. He will allow the chaos to push you to the quiet place. He will allow the confusion to drive you to the only voice that never changes. And when you finally surrender to that quiet, when you let go of the need to control, to understand, to fix, it's there. In that moment, that clarity begins. Stillness is where perspective shifts. You stop asking, why is this happening to me, and begin asking, what are you teaching me through this? You stop trying to escape the storm and begin learning how to anchor in it. You stop panicking about the future and begin trusting the one who already knows. So if you're in a season right now where God is telling you to stay quiet, obey him. Not because you're defeated, but because he's drawing you closer. Not because he's silent, but because he wants to speak to you in a deeper way. Don't fight the stillness. Don't rush past the silence. Lean into it. Let it do its work. Let it soften your heart. Let it strengthen your spirit. Let it prepare you for what's next. Because here's the truth. God never wastes stillness. He never ignores a quiet heart. He sees your posture of surrender, and he honors. The world may not see what's happening in you, but heaven does. And when the time is right, he will speak. He will move. He will make it clear. But until then, let the quiet be your sanctuary. Let it be your strength. Let it be your reminder that the God who holds galaxies in his hands also holds every word your heart is waiting to hear. There comes a moment in every believer's journey when the urge to step in, to take control, to fix a situation becomes overwhelming. You feel wronged, overlooked, mistreated, or misunderstood, and everything in you wants to take action, speak up, fight back, or prove a point. But then God whispers something that feels so unnatural to the human heart. Stay quiet. Be still. Don't interfere. And that's where the real battle begins. Not with the people around you, but within yourself. It's a hard thing to do, staying quiet when you want justice. It feels counterintuitive, almost irresponsible. Isn't action better than inaction? Isn't defending yourself the right thing to do? But what God wants us to understand is this. There is a divine difference between fighting for yourself and letting God fight for you. And more often than not, when we rush to take matters into our own hands, we end up delaying or diminishing what God was about to do on our behalf. There comes a moment in every believer's journey where the natural instinct is to step in, to fix, to fight, to defend. That moment, filled with frustration or injustice or confusion, tests the very core of our faith. We feel the pressure to act, to speak, to take control of the situation. But it's in those very moments that God often gives us a different command. Stay quiet, step back, and let him do what only he can do. Because there is a kind of victory that only comes when we stop interfering and allow God to fight for us. It's difficult, isn't it, to stand still while being misunderstood? To remain silent when you know the truth? To resist the urge to argue, defend, or correct when someone is twisting your words? But that restraint isn't weakness, it's faith, it's trust, it's surrender. And that surrender invites the supernatural. It invites the hand of God to move in ways that no amount of human effort could accomplish. When we hold back our reaction, we are making room for God's intervention. In the book of Exodus, the Israelites found themselves cornered between Pharaoh's army and the Red Sea. Fear gripped their heart. Complaints rose from their lips. They were ready to give up. But Moses, under the direction of the Lord, told them something that continues to echo across generations. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Imagine that. In the face of danger, the answer wasn't to draw swords or form a strategy. It was to stand still and watch what God would do. And he did. He split the sea. He made a way where there was no way. He proved that his power needs no assistance, only trust. When God asks you to stay quiet, it's often because your words would only complicate what he's trying to simplify. It's because your reactions might delay what he's trying to accelerate. It's because your version of justice can't compare to his perfect judgment. He sees every angle, every motive, every hidden truth, and he responds not out of emotion but out of righteousness. When we interfere, we risk making matters worse. But when we get out of the way, God steps in and does what we cannot. There's a quiet kind of strength in refusing to engage with the enemy on his terms. When the enemy attacks your peace, your reputation, your purpose, your mind, the instinct is to retaliate. But retaliation often invites more chaos. God, however, calls us to a different battlefield, one where the weapons are spiritual and the strategy is surrender. He says, "Let me do this. Let me speak for you. Let me defend you in ways you don't even see coming." We must remember that God is not slow to act. He does not overlook your pain. He gathers every tear. He is not ignoring the injustice. He is preparing a resolution that will bring him glory and you peace. The delay is not his absence, it's his setup. And while you're waiting, staying silent, holding your peace, he's aligning people, shifting hearts, and orchestrating outcomes that go far beyond what your words could accomplish. But make no mistake, staying quiet doesn't mean doing nothing. It means praying instead of reacting. It means seeking wisdom instead of venting frustration. It means trusting that your silence is not ignored, it's empowered. Because when your mouth is closed but your heart is open to God, he hears everything. He responds not to noise but to faith. He responds not to complaints but to surrender. Sometimes we talk ourselves out of miracles because we won't stop trying to manage the outcome. We think we have to take control, be our own advocate, speak louder to be heard. But what if your silence is the very key that unlocks the door God is waiting to open? What if the breakthrough is on the other side of you, letting go? It's not always easy to know when to step back. There are times when God calls us to speak truth, to stand firm, to take action. But there are also divine moments when he says this one is, and when he says that, he means it. He doesn't need your help to win a battle he already has victory over. What he needs is your trust, your stillness, your willingness to let go and let him be God. There is power in restraint. There is clarity in quietness. There is protection in obedience. Every time you choose silence over retaliation, you're declaring with your actions that God is your defender. You're saying, "I trust you more than I trust myself." And that trust honors him. That trust activates his power. That trust allows heaven to move on your behalf. So if you're in a season where you're tempted to speak out, to set the record straight, to react in anger or pain, pause, pray, ask God if this is a battle you need to fight or one he's already handling. And if he tells you to stay quiet, don't see it as a sign of defeat. See it as the beginning of divine intervention. Because when God fights for you, things shift, hearts soften, truth surfaces, justice comes not on your timetable but in perfect time. And when the dust settles, when the battle is over, you'll know it wasn't your argument that brought the victory, it was your faith, it was your silence, it was your surrender. Let the world do what it does, let people say what they say, let circumstances swirl around you. You don't have to respond to everything, you don't have to fix everything, you just have to trust the one who sees everything and holds all things together. When God tells you to be quiet, it's because he's already speaking on your behalf in places you can't reach. He's already defending your name, your future, your peace. And when he moves, everyone will know that it was him, not you, who won the battle. In Exodus 14:14, the Israelites were trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army. They panicked, cried out, and questioned Moses. But Moses, led by God, told them something astonishing. "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Can you imagine hearing that when you're surrounded, terrified, and unarmed? Yet that was God's instruction: be still, stay quiet, don't interfere. What happened next? God parted the sea. He made a way where there was no way. He delivered them not by their effort, not by their strategies, not by their arguments, but by his power alone. That's what God does when we step back and trust him to step. But the problem is, we often don't wait long enough to see the miracle. We get tired of the silence. We get anxious in the waiting. So we act. We speak out of turn. We try to control outcomes that are not ours to control. And in doing so, we interfere with what God is trying to do supernaturally. We trade His victory for our version of justice, and it never satisfies. When God tells you to stay quiet, it's not to keep you powerless, it's to protect you. Because when we act outside of His timing, we open ourselves up to unnecessary consequences, arguments that spiral, relationships that fracture, reputations that suffer. But when we wait on Him, when we hold our peace and trust His process, He begins to work in ways we never could. He speaks to hearts. He orchestrates outcomes. He reveals truth that we could never force. It's easy to think that our silence means defeat, but in God's kingdom, silence can be strategy. Sometimes your greatest weapon is restraint. Sometimes the most powerful move is not to move at all. And this isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Because when we truly believe that God sees everything, that He knows our hearts, that He is just and righteous and sovereign, we don't need to defend ourselves at every turn. We don't need to get the last word. We don't need to win every argument. We only need to stay close to Him and stay out of His way. There is deep peace in knowing that the battle is not yours. There is a holy freedom in releasing the burden of being your own defender. God fights best when you stop trying to fix everything in your own strength. And it's not that He needs you to be silent for Him to act. It's that your silence is a declaration of trust. It's saying, God, I believe You've got this. I believe You see what I cannot see. I believe You are working even when I feel forgotten. That kind of faith is what moves heaven. That kind of surrender is what brings divine justice. Not always on our timeline, not always in the way we imagined, but always in a way that brings glory to His name and peace.